He ruled the city with fear. But he never knew he had a daughter. 20 years lost.
The rain fell like broken glass, sharp and relentless, against the black Mercedes as it rolled through the deserted streets of Palermo. Inside, Marco Leone's hands gripped the steering wheel with a precision that only decades of running a criminal empire could hone. His suit, dark as the storm outside, clung to him as if it were part of his skin. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of everything he'd built and everything he'd lost sat heavy in the silence between the windshield wipers. He hadn't planned to come back here tonight. The city had changed. The old docks smelled of salt and oil, the neon flickering like a dying heartbeat. But someone had sent him a message that made his blood freeze. Your daughter is here. Tonight. Come alone. No name. No explanations. Just the fact that for the first time in 20 years he could meet the child he'd never known. His mind raced. He had been 18 when he'd left Italy, chasing power and revenge after his father's murder, too young to handle the weight of a family. And there had been her Lena, her mother. She was the brightest light he'd ever seen, quick-witted and fiery, with a laugh that made the coldest nights feel warm. And he had left her, left them, choosing the empire over love. The guilt had eaten at him every day, a quiet shadow he couldn't outrun. The Mercedes came to a stop outside an unmarked building, a glass and steel cube that looked more like a startup office than anything else. Marco took a slow breath and stepped out. The rain soaked through his coat, but he didn't care. Every instinct screamed at him to be cautious. Mafia life had taught him that trust was currency, and he had none to spend tonight. Inside, the air smelled of machines and metal, the hum of computers filling the silence. And then he saw her, not Lena, her daughter. A girl, maybe 17, sitting at a sleek desk with a headset on, fingers flying across a keyboard with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Her hair was thick, curly, and black, tied back in a messy bun. And her eyes, those eyes, were so like his own that it made his chest tighten. She didn't notice him at first. She was immersed in her world of codes and screens, lines of data reflecting on her glasses. And then she spoke into her headset, her voice steady, professional. Patch the firewall. I don't care if it triggers an alert. Marco froze. That voice, that command, that calm confidence. He remembered Lena's laugh in the same room he'd just left behind decades ago, her hands wild as she gestured at some trivial argument, but the same fire burned here. Only now, it was more dangerous, sharper. His daughter had inherited it all. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. She froze mid-keystroke, her head snapping up, eyes wide. Who are you? Marco swallowed, the words catching in his throat. I'm your father. The silence that followed was suffocating. Her gaze sharpened, suspicion and anger flashing. My what? She said slowly, like tasting a word she didn't recognize. He started, then stopped. What could he say that would make sense after 20 years of absence? I left your mother. I left you. I thought I could come back now, and it would all be okay. None of it would. From the corner of the room, a taller woman appeared, her skin deep brown, her eyes wary but protective. She was stunning in a way that made Marco's chest ache, the kind of beauty that wasn't about curves or features, but about strength and presence. Lena had been bright, reckless, and magnetic. He recognized that same aura in this woman. This must be the mother of his daughter. He didn't know her name, didn't know if she had ever forgiven him, but he could feel her judgment like a knife slicing through him. What's going on here? She demanded, stepping between Marco and the girl. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched, betraying the tension she held tight inside. Marco raised his hands, a gesture both apologetic and surrendering. I didn't come here to fight. I came to see her, to meet my daughter. The girl stood now, her fingers brushing her chair instinctively as if she might need it as a shield. You're lying, she said. Her voice was firm, yet the faint tremor betrayed the storm inside her. No, Marco said quietly, I'm not. I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I left. I was a coward. I thought I was protecting you both by staying away, but I see now that I only hurt you. Her mother's eyes narrowed. You expect us to just accept that after all these years Marco didn't flinch. He had faced death more times than he could count. Men with guns, rivals who wanted his empire, betrayal from friends he thought loyal, but he hadn't faced this kind of fear, this kind of raw, living anger, and he didn't know if he could survive it. The girl took a step forward, her curiosity warring with her distrust. She studied him as if scanning a line of code for anomalies. If what you're saying is true, prove it. Show me you're not just another ghost from stories, my mom told me. Marco's chest tightened. 20 years to build an empire, to rule a city with an iron fist, and tonight he felt powerless. All the money, all the power, all the fear he commanded, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was this small, brilliant girl standing in front of him, her mother behind her, and the chasm he had created between them. And then, in the quiet hum of the office, the rain still hammering against the windows, Marco Leone realized that every choice he had made had led to this one moment, a chance at redemption, or a final, crushing rejection. The girl's eyes never left him. You have 1 hour, she said softly, almost a warning. 1 hour to convince me you're real. 1 hour, before I walk away forever. Marco nodded slowly, his mind already racing. I will not fail you. Not this time. But as he sat down, trying to understand the world his daughter had built without him, he had no idea that the truths waiting to unravel would shake not just him, but the fragile bond between mother and child in ways he could never anticipate. The storm outside softened, but the one inside the room was just beginning. The girl, Sophie, watched him as if he were a glitch in her code, something impossible yet undeniable. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to retreat into the digital fortress she had built around herself. Marco studied her quietly, noticing the little habits Lena had once had, the way her brow furrowed when thinking, the slight curl of her lips when concentrating, the restless tapping of her foot. It was like looking at a mirror of the past he'd never claimed. Her mother, Amara, stood rigid behind her, arms crossed, the kind of posture that spoke of battles fought and victories hard won. Marco's eyes softened, tracing the curve of her jaw, the tension that refused to release. Amara had carried a life alone, raised a brilliant girl in a world that could have swallowed them whole, and she had done it with quiet courage. That courage had once made him fall in love, and it haunted him now. I know what you're thinking, Marco said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, controlled, but laced with vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. That I don't deserve to be here, that I abandoned you. You're right. Sophia's eyes narrowed. You left. You never called, never sent money. Never. She stopped herself, the hurt choking her words. You're just some story my mom told me. I was scared, Marco admitted, the words tasting foreign in his own mouth. Scared of being weak. Scared I would ruin you. I thought distance would protect you, but it only destroyed the chance I had to be part of your life. Amra's eyes flickered. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to lash out, to accuse him, to throw all the years of anger in his face. But instead, she said nothing. Her silence was a wall, one that had kept them safe, and now it was up to Marco to find a way through. Sophia's gaze didn't waver. Why now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, almost lost under the hum of computers. After 20 years, why come back now? Marco's jaw tightened. He had rehearsed 1,000 answers in the car, none of them sufficient. Because, he said finally, I realized that no empire, no money, no power is worth a life without family. I've built everything else, but I've lost the one thing that matters. Her mother shifted slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. Words, Amara said flatly. I've heard them before. What matters is proof. Sophia tilted her head, scanning him like she scanned code. Prove it then, she said. Show me something only my father would know. The request stunned Marco. He hadn't expected a test like this, a challenge that went beyond apologies or promises. He had to reach into memory, the soft, intimate moments with Lena before the empire swallowed him whole. He took a deep breath. Do you see that old painting in the corner? He asked, nodding subtly. Sophia's brow furrowed. Your mother has kept it all these years, a little girl in a field, chasing butterflies. I gave it to her on her 18th birthday, the one she never had. I wanted to make her laugh. Sophia's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition. That painting. You, she stopped, the memory colliding with the reality of the man in front of her. Marco could see the pieces of disbelief and longing battling in her expression. Every detail matters, he said gently. The corner of the field, the way the sun hits the flowers, the butterfly on the horizon, it's all true. And I remember it, because I remember her. I remember both of you. Amara's lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head slightly, a gesture of disbelief and caution. He could be lying, she muttered under her breath, though Marco caught the tremor in her voice, a crack in her armor. Sophia took a step closer, her curiosity now outweighing her skepticism. I want to believe you, she said softly, voice trembling, but I don't know if I can. Marco reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He handed it to her carefully. I kept a record of things I should have told you, things I wish I could have been there for. It's not much, but it's all I had to give you before tonight. Sophia's fingers brushed the notebook, hesitant, almost afraid it might vanish if she touched it. She opened it slowly. Sketches, notes, little drawings, evidence of a father who had watched from a distance, loved silently, and regretted endlessly. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't close it. She couldn't. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Marco simply nodded, giving her the space she needed. No words could fix the past. Only moments like this could begin to stitch it together. Amara finally spoke, her voice steadier now, though still edged with caution. You think one notebook fixes 20 years? Marco met her gaze evenly. No, I know it doesn't, but it's a start, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I belong if you let me. The room grew silent. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, leaving a faint mist against the windows. Sophia's fingers lingered over the notebook, torn between hope and fear, while Amara's eyes softened in a way Marco hadn't seen in years, and then Sophia spoke, the words cutting the tension like a blade. There's something else, something you don't know about me. I've been working on something important. Something dangerous. Marco leaned forward, his instincts on high alert. Tell me. Sophia swallowed, hesitation flickering across her face. It's about the people who still chase you, who still want your empire. I've been tracking them, using their own technology against them. The weight of her words sank into Marco's chest. His daughter, the girl he had never known, was now entangled in the same dangerous world. He had built a world she had inherited unknowingly. The thought of losing her, of letting history repeat itself, twisted his stomach into knots. Amara's gaze hardened, protective as ever. You've dragged her into your mess, she spat. Marco flinched but didn't respond. He had no right to argue, not yet. Sophia looked at him, her eyes burning with determination. I didn't ask for this, but I can handle it, I think. But I need you to be honest. No lies. No games. Can you do that? Marco nodded, the weight of years pressing down, but the clarity of purpose shining through. For you, Sophia, I will tell you everything. The three of them stood in silence, the hum of computers and the lingering rain, framing a fragile moment of fragile trust. But the danger lurking outside the office was real, and Marco knew it. If he wanted to protect the daughter he had finally found, he had to face the ghosts of the past, before they destroyed everything. And as Sophia opened her laptop and started revealing the threads of a conspiracy he had once thought buried, Marco realized that this night would change all of them forever. The first connection had been made, but would it be enough to survive what was coming? The first thing Marco noticed, as he followed Sophia down the narrow corridor of the office, was the hum of tension, thick and electric. The walls were lined with monitors, each displaying feeds of data, surveillance cameras, and encrypted files. He had spent decades ruling an empire, but this was something new. It was precise, methodical, and dangerously clever. His daughter was already leagues ahead of him. Watch this, Sophia said, her voice steady despite the faint tremor he could hear underneath. She typed rapidly, fingers dancing over the keys with an intimacy that spoke of years of solitude and self-taught brilliance. They're planning something in the next 24 hours. If we don't move fast, people could get hurt. Marco leaned in, scanning the screens, but he didn't understand half of what he saw. Firewalls, encryption codes, nodes and traps. It was a language he'd never learned. But the urgency was clear, the stakes immediate. He felt a pang of guilt. 20 years ago, he had taught her nothing, left her with only stories and regrets. And now, she was trying to protect him, or maybe herself, from a world he had built. "Who are they?" he asked finally. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Sophia hesitated. "They're remnants, people loyal to the old bosses. Men who thought your disappearance meant they could rise without consequence. But they've been watching, planning, and now they're bold enough to strike." Amara stepped closer, protective instinct flaring. "We need to leave," she said. Her gaze was sharp, scanning the shadows, her body tense like a coiled spring. "This isn't just tech. This is them testing us. Waiting for you to make a mistake." Marco nodded. He had lived his life walking through storms, bullets, and betrayals. But walking through this was different. He wasn't used to relying on anyone, and yet here he was, his fate intertwined with the daughter he had never known, and the woman he had left behind. Sophia turned to him, eyes fierce. "I can't do this alone. I need your help. I need someone who knows the streets, who knows how to handle people who won't follow the rules." Marco swallowed. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, standing beside her, protecting her, but the reality was sharper, heavier. "I'll help," he said quietly. "But you have to trust me. Every step." She looked to him, doubt and hope warring in her gaze. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay. But first, we need to test them. See who's still loyal, who's still dangerous. And that means sending a signal." Amara stepped in, placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "I'm not letting either of you walk into a trap," she said firmly. Her tone wasn't just protective, it was a promise. Marco realized then that he had underestimated her. For 20 years, she had carried this burden alone, and now she was unshakable. Together, they initiated a plan. Sophia's fingers moved like lightning across the keyboard, tracing digital footprints, probing weaknesses. Marco's job was simpler: intimidation, presence, the kind of authority only a lifetime in the shadows could grant. And as the hours passed, he felt a strange, fragile connection forming. Not yet trust, but something close, something that felt like the beginning of a bond. The first message arrived at midnight. It was short, almost casual. "We know you're back. Step carefully." Marco's jaw tightened. He felt that familiar surge of adrenaline, the same that had ruled his life for decades. But now, it was tempered with something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Not for himself, but for the girl who had suddenly become his entire world. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "They're testing us," she said. "We need to respond, or they'll strike first. And it won't be subtle." Marco nodded, studying her. "Then we'll be ready. Tell me what you need me to do." Hours turned into a tense ballet of preparation. Sophia guided him through the digital landscape, explaining threats, vulnerabilities, and contingencies. Marco absorbed what he could, but the lesson wasn't about understanding every detail. It was about presence, timing, and instinct. And he realized something vital. He had been given a second chance, and he couldn't waste it. When the time came, they initiated their first countermeasure. Sophia's code created a ripple, a signal designed to draw attention while keeping them safe. Marco stood behind her, watching, alert to every shadow, every sound. And then it happened. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Men. Marco's body moved before his mind could catch up. He stepped out, presence commanding, eyes like steel. The intruders froze, underestimating him, thinking this was only a digital fight. They had forgotten the man they were dealing with. "Who sent you?" Marco demanded, voice low, dangerous. His posture alone told them resistance would be costly. One man laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "The city doesn't forget old debts, Leon. You left, but we stayed." Marco's eyes darkened. Memories of blood, betrayal, and fire rose unbidden. But now, his rage wasn't for empire or vengeance, it was for the girl behind him, the daughter he had just met, and the mother who had never stopped protecting her. "Then you'll remember me," Marco said, cold and steady. He stepped forward, and the men flinched. Every move, every word, was calculated to intimidate without striking, yet the threat was unmistakable. Inside, Sophia and Amara watched, tense, breaths held. This was her father, Yes, but could he protect them? Could the man who had abandoned them now stand as their shield? The men hesitated, caught between fear and loyalty. Marco's presence was a living testament to the life they had underestimated, and as he stared them down, he realized something he hadn't in years. Power wasn't about fear anymore. It was about love, and he would protect the ones he loved, no matter the cost. Finally, the men backed away, murmuring threats that fell flat against the force of his presence. The corridor was silent again, except for Sophia's sharp inhale. She looked at him, eyes wide. You did it," she whispered. Marco nodded, catching his breath. "We did it. Together." Amara's gaze softened, but the caution remained. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "They'll come again. And next time, it won't just be tests." Marco placed a hand lightly on Sophia's shoulder, an anchor. "Then we'll be ready. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in 20 years, the three of them felt a fragile, hard-won alliance forming. But outside, the city breathed, dark and alive, and Marco knew the storm was only beginning. The sun had barely risen, but the office was already alive with the quiet buzz of preparation. Sophia moved with fluid precision, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she ran simulations, tracking movements, vulnerabilities, and patterns. Marco stood behind her, scanning the monitors, his instincts honed over decades on the streets. He wasn't just watching, he was learning, attuning himself to a world that was at once familiar and terrifyingly new. Amara sat in the corner, arms crossed, eyes alert, silently judging every move. Marco caught her glance. "You're worried," he said, a low smile tugging at his lips. She didn't answer, just gave him a sharp nod. Protective, always protective, he reminded himself. That was her strength, and the same strength he had once loved and abandoned. Sophia suddenly froze mid-keystroke. "They're moving," she whispered, voice tight. "They know we're awake. They're testing the perimeter now." Marco's muscles tensed. "How many?" he asked. 3 men, lightly armed. "They're probing the building for weaknesses. Nothing heavy yet, but they're close." Amara stood abruptly. "We can't let them get inside. Not for anything." "Sophia, we stick to the plan." "Marco, you..." She stopped, realizing she didn't need to tell him what to do. He already knew. The first man appeared at the edge of the security feed. He was careful, calculated, but inexperienced. Marco's eyes narrowed. He had trained for encounters like this all his life, but this wasn't just about taking down strangers, it was about protecting the daughter he had just met. "Stay calm," Marco said, his voice low but firm. "We handle this quietly. No unnecessary risks." Sophia's fingers danced over the keys, initiating digital traps to delay the intruders, locking doors and activating silent alarms. Her confidence surprised him. She was fearless, but he could see the tension in her jaw. The stakes were real. Every decision carried consequences. The first man reached the main corridor, unaware of the sensors and automated systems now locking him in place. Marco moved quietly, shadowing him, every step deliberate. The man froze as he realized the hallway. Doors wouldn't budge. Panic flickered across his face. "Who's there?" the man called, voice trembling. Marco stepped from the shadows. The man's eyes widened, recognizing the figure before him. "Leon?" Marco's gaze didn't waver. "You shouldn't be here," he said simply. One movement, a tilt of his head, and the man stumbled backward, trapped by the pressure of presence alone. Behind him, Sophia watched, a mixture of awe and fear in her eyes. This was the father she had only just met, and here he was, protecting her as if he had been doing it all his life. The second intruder tried the side entrance, forcing a lock. Sophia caught it instantly. "Two coming your way," she called. Marco moved again, swift and silent, intercepting the man before he could reach the inner office. A brief struggle, enough to subdue him without bloodshed, and he was secured. The third man was the most cautious, the youngest, hesitant but dangerous in his unpredictability. Marco knew experience often trumped caution, but unpredictability demanded respect. The man lunged, and Marco dodged instinctively, twisting and pinning him against the wall with a force that left no doubt. This was a man trained in consequence, a man who had survived 1,000 encounters. Sophia gasped, stepping closer. "Dad," Marco held up a hand. "Watch," he said, his voice calm but commanding. He disarmed the man, his movements precise and deliberate, a dance of muscle memory and control. Every second felt stretched, every breath weighted with tension. Amara stepped forward now, her hand resting lightly on Sophia's shoulder. "We need to move them," she said quietly, nodding to Marco. He understood instantly. The men needed containment, and they needed to leave without leaving evidence that could trace them back. Together, the three of them moved, a silent unit forged from necessity. Marco's authority, Amara's vigilance, Sophia's brilliance, they were an unexpected but formidable combination. Each intruder neutralized, each threat contained, but the danger hadn't passed. Sophia turned to him afterward, her chest heaving. You didn't even hesitate." Her eyes searched his, as if trying to reconcile the father she'd imagined with the man standing before her. You're really my father." Marco knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "And you're my daughter, the one I never wanted to hurt, but I did. I'm making sure it doesn't happen again." Amara's expression softened, but the weariness remained. "This is only the beginning," she said. "They'll come back, smarter, faster. And next time, they won't make mistakes." Marco nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had survived wars, betrayals, and assassins, but this was different. This was personal. This was family. The three of them stood in the quiet of the office, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by the gravity of what had just happened. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the city damp and silent, but inside, the storm had only just begun. Sophia closed her laptop, taking a deep breath. "We need to prepare. They'll escalate, and I don't want anyone caught off guard again." Marco placed a hand on her shoulder, a grounding presence. "We'll face it together," he said. "No one touches you. No one touches us." Amara finally allowed herself a faint nod. "Then let's start preparing." As they began to plan for the inevitable next strike, Marco realized that for the first time in decades, he wasn't alone. He had his daughter, brilliant and unyielding, and the woman who had protected her all these years. And though the danger looming over them was real, so was the fragile, growing bond that had begun to take root, a bond that might just survive the coming storm. And somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting, the remnants of the old empire prepare to make their move, unaware that the father they thought gone had returned. And he wasn't leaving without his daughter. The streets of Palermo were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes every shadow feel like it's alive. Marco drove the Mercedes slowly, Sophia riding shotgun with her laptop balanced on her knees, analyzing every corner, every possible threat. Amara sat in the back, her eyes constantly scanning, calculating, a silent guardian ready to strike. "This area is compromised," Sophia said, tapping rapidly on her keyboard. "They've planted surveillance near the docks, 3 different points. If we're not careful, they'll know we're moving before we even step out of the car." Marco's jaw tightened. "Then we go around. Take the old route, the one they wouldn't think to watch." Hadn't been back to these streets in decades, but muscle memory and instinct guided him. He knew every alley, every hidden path. The city remembered him, even if people didn't. Amar leaned forward, voice low. "We move carefully. One mistake, and this ends badly." Sophia's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "We can't just avoid them. We need to confront this. If we keep hiding, they'll keep escalating." Marco glanced at her, noting the determination in her eyes. It was the same fire Lena had carried, the same fire he'd once loved, and the same fire that now lived in his daughter. "Then we confront," he said simply. "But we do it smart, controlled, together." They exited the car at a quiet intersection, shadow swallowing them. Marco led, moving like a ghost, his presence commanding even the darkness. Sophia trailed him slightly, tablet in hand, eyes scanning every signal, every anomaly in the airwaves. Amara stayed close to her, protective, ready to act the instant danger arrived. They reached the warehouse district, a place Marco knew intimately from years past, the scent of salt and rust hanging in the air. And that's when the first shot rang out, sharp and startling. Marco dropped instinctively, pulling Sophia and Amora down behind crates. "They know we're here," Sophia said, voice tight. 2 men, rooftops, Snipers. Marco's mind went to work instantly, cover to cover. Move left. Slowly, don't let them pin us down. Amara's hand brushed against Sophia's arm. Stay close, she ordered, her tone protective. Don't take any unnecessary risks. The trio moved as one, shadows slipping between crates and rusted machinery. Marco's senses were alive, every sound, every movement, every glint of metal. He felt the weight of the years, the battles, the betrayals. But now it wasn't about Empire. It was about this moment, this family he had finally found. A second shot rang out, closer this time. Marco froze the bullets in his mind, calculating trajectories, cover points. Could hear the faint whirring of drones. The signature of high-tech surveillance Sophia had predicted. Dad, Sophia whispered urgently. They're not just men. They're using drones to track movement. I can blind them, but I'll need time. Marco nodded. Do it. I'll keep them occupied. Her fingers moved over the tablet, deploying digital interference that caused the drones to wobble midair, their cameras scrambling. The intruders cursed, frustrated by the sudden blind spots. Marco used the distraction to advance, moving with lethal precision. A man dropped down from a rooftop, knife in hand, lunging at Marco. Without hesitation, Marco sidestepped, twisting, and disarmed him in a fluid motion, pinning him silently against the metal wall. The man's eyes widened in shock. You're gone. I thought. I'm never gone, Marco said. Voice low, steel threaded with regret and resolve. He released the man and signaled Sophia and Amora. Move. Now. Sophia's tablet beeped. Another intrusion detected, this time from behind. Amora's eyes narrowed. Back exit. Move. They sprinted, weaving between shadows, the cityscape becoming a maze of danger. Marco kept glancing at Sophia, ensuring she stayed safe, his instincts protective. Every step reminded him of the years lost, of all the moments he could never reclaim, but also of the moment he could finally be there. They reached a narrow alley, but the end was blocked. Marco's heart sank briefly, but he didn't show it. Over the fence. Carefully. Sophia hesitated. I can't. It's too high. Marco crouched, offering his hands. I've got you. One by one, they climbed, a careful rhythm of trust and strength. Sophia's pulse raced, adrenaline mixing with fear and excitement. Marco's hands steadied her, guiding her over, and for a brief moment, he felt the fragile connection between them, the bond of parent and child forming under fire. They landed on the other side, breathless, hearts pounding. Amara scanned the area, noting the retreating figure in the distance. They're pulling back, for now, she said cautiously. But this isn't over. They'll regroup. Sophia collapsed onto the ground for a moment, laptop clutched tightly. I thought I could handle it alone, she admitted, voice shaking. But I can't. Not without you, both of you. Marco knelt beside her, brushing a damp curl from her face. You never had to, he said softly. You've been strong all these years, but you don't have to be alone anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you. Amara's expression softened, her arms wrapping around Sophia protectively. She looked at Marco, eyes hard but grateful. You're here. And for the first time in 20 years, I believe you mean it. Marco stood slowly, surveying the streets. Danger still lingered, shadows still moved in the corners of his vision. But for the first time in decades, he wasn't facing it alone. He had his daughter, and the woman he had never stopped loving, even after all these years. And as they prepared to retreat to safety, he made a silent promise. Nothing would ever separate them again. The night was far from over. The remnants of the old empire were out there watching, waiting. But Marco Leone had returned not just as a boss, but as a father. And this time, he would fight for the people who mattered most. The safe house was a converted loft on the outskirts of the city, a place Marco hadn't touched in years. It smelled faintly of dust and damp concrete. But tonight it was the only sanctuary they had. Sophia set up her laptop in the corner, monitors reflecting her intense focus. While Marco paced near the window, eyes scanning the street for any sign of pursuit. Amara leaned against the wall, arms folded, her stance still alert, like a predator waiting for the storm to hit. They're not going to let this rest, Sophia said without looking up. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, hacking into surveillance systems and tracking anomalies in real time. They've regrouped. New players, smarter, faster. And they know we're together now. Marco stopped pacing, his hands tightening into fists. Then we prepare. Every angle. Every route. No mistakes. They've underestimated me before, never again. Amara shot him a look, sharp and knowing. It's not just about you anymore. It's her, Marco. Your daughter. One slip, one miscalculation, and it's over. He nodded. The weight of her words pressed down on him. He had survived countless enemies, betrayals, and gunfights, but the thought of losing Sophia was unlike anything he'd ever felt. Fear for himself was familiar. Fear for her was something new, raw, and all-consuming. Hours passed. The city outside darkened, streets glowing under flickering lamps. Sophia had mapped escape routes, set up digital traps, and planted countermeasures. She moved with a precision that made Marco both proud and wary. She had inherited more than just his eyes. She had inherited his mind for strategy, his instinct for survival. Then, just after midnight, it happened. A message flashed on Sophia's monitor. You can't hide forever. Sophia's eyes narrowed. They're probing again, physical and digital. They want to test our defenses. Then we make them regret it, Marco said, his voice low, heavy with determination. The first shadow moved outside the loft. Marco drew his pistol instinctively. But before he could act, the building's lights flickered, cut off by a digital strike. Sophia cursed under her breath. They've breached our network. They're trying to blind us. Amara grabbed a baseball bat, leaning in the corner, her stance ready. Stay close. Stay silent. The front door shuddered under the force of an impact. Marco slipped to the side, signaling Sophia and Amara to the back exit. Move. Now. They ran through the narrow back staircase, adrenaline heightening every sense. Outside, the city was alive with rain-slicked streets and the shadows of men who had come to finish what they'd started. Marco led the way, senses scanning, instincts honed over decades kicking in. Two men emerged from the shadows, guns raised. Marco didn't hesitate. He fired a warning shot into the pavement, the sound echoing sharply. The men froze, unsure of what to do. Sophia's quick thinking flashed on the tablet. She hacked a nearby streetlight, causing it to flicker violently and blind the attackers temporarily. Amara struck the nearest man with the bat, her force precise and unyielding, knocking him off balance. Marco moved like water, disarming the second, pinning him silently against the wall. Their teamwork was effortless, born not from practice, but from instinct and necessity. Then came the worst part. A drone swooped down from above, sensors locking onto Sophia. She barely had time to deploy a countermeasure, and Marco grabbed her arm, pulling her to cover. The drone crashed into the pavement, sparks flying. Sophia's heart raced. They've upgraded. These aren't amateurs. They know how I work. Marco's jaw tightened. Then we give them a lesson they won't forget. They came for you, now they face me. The final ambusher appeared at the far end of the street, gun trained on Marco. Without hesitation, Marco raised his hands, but not to surrender. His movement was deliberate, calculated. One step closer, and you won't walk away, he said, voice deadly calm. The man hesitated. Years of street wars had taught him to recognize a predator. Marco's eyes, cold and unyielding, spoke of decades of survival, of loss, of a man who would protect what mattered at any cost. Sophia watched, awe and fear warring in her chest. She had imagined this man her entire life, a ghost in the stories her mother told, and now here he was, not just a shadow of legend, but alive, present, fighting for her. Amara moved closer to Sophia. Stay calm. Focus. Her voice was steady, grounding. Sophia nodded, fingers twitching over the tablet, ready to deploy another countermeasure if needed. Marco's stare never wavered. The ambusher faltered, then turned to run, calculating that retreat was the better option. Marco didn't chase. He didn't need to. Presence had done the work for him. The rain fell harder now, soaking them all, but it didn't matter. They were alive. Together. And for the first time, Marco realized that the real fight wasn't just surviving attacks. It was surviving the past, the mistakes, and proving he could be a father worth trusting. Sophia exhaled, shaking, adrenaline still thrumming. I couldn't have done this alone, she admitted, voice barely audible over the rain. Marco pulled her close, protective, grounding. You're not alone anymore, and I'll never let you face the world by yourself again. Amara placed a hand on Marco's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of trust, respect, and perhaps forgiveness. This isn't over, she said. But we survived tonight. That counts for something. Marco looked at the two most important people in his life, his daughter, fierce and brilliant, and the woman who had raised her with unyielding strength. He felt something he hadn't in decades: hope. A dangerous, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what he had lost. But as they walked back toward the safe house, soaked and exhausted, Marco knew the night was only a glimpse of the storm to come. Whoever had sent these attacks would not stop. They had awakened a lion, but this lion had something the enemy couldn't touch: family. And in the quiet between raindrops and distant city sounds, Marco Leone silently swore he would never leave them again. The loft was quiet now, the storm outside reduced to a soft drizzle that tapped against the windows like a hesitant warning. Inside, Sophia hunched over her monitors, eyes bloodshot from hours of tracking, coding, and countermeasures. Marco sat opposite her, leaning back in a chair he didn't normally sit in. One meant for contemplation, not comfort, watching her work. Amara stood nearby, arms crossed, her gaze never leaving either of them. You're incredible, Marco said quietly, his voice almost lost in the hum of the computers. You've been surviving this alone, and yet you've built something I couldn't even dream of at your age. Sophia didn't look up, but her fingers hesitated on the keyboard. I had to, she said simply. No one else would protect me, and I didn't want to need anyone. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the years of solitude and self-reliance she had forced upon herself. Marco leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You don't have to anymore. You don't have to do it alone. Sophia's hands froze, and she finally met his gaze. For a long moment, her expression was unreadable, skeptical, wary, but somewhere beneath it, a spark of something fragile: hope. I don't know if I can trust that, she admitted. After everything, after 20 years, why now? Why show up? Marco exhaled, the words heavy on his tongue. Because I can't undo the past. I can't take back the mistakes I made. But I can be here now. I can be the father I should have been. That's all I can promise. No games, no lies. Just presence. Always. Amara shifted, moving to stand beside Sophia. Words are easy, she said softly but firmly. Actions are what count. You've made it here tonight, but what happens when they strike again? Will you be the father she needs then? Marco's jaw tightened. I will. He didn't say I can, or I hope to be. He said it as a statement, a vow. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one he had carried inside for 20 years, and now he intended to weather it properly. Sophia's fingers returned to the keyboard, but slower this time. We need to plan. They won't stop, they never do. And now they know we're together. That makes us targets. Marco leaned closer, studying her screens. Then we strike before they can. Take the initiative. Not just defensive, offensive. Show them they can't control us. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. You want to go after them? Now. Yes, Marco said. We can't wait for them to pick the next target. We hit first. We control the board. And we do it together. Amara's eyebrows rose. You understand what that means? We're stepping into their world, the one you left behind. One wrong move. Her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. I know, Marco said, voice steady. But I'm not the man I was 20 years ago. I've learned. I've survived. And now I fight for more than power. I fight for them. He glanced at Sophia. For you. Sophia's eyes softened. She finally allowed herself to imagine the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders alone. They began strategizing. Sophia fed him information on their enemies' positions, digital traps, and weak points. Marco applied his knowledge of people, instincts, and street-level tactics. Amara contributed logistics and protective measures, her experience as a mother translating seamlessly into strategy. Together, they formed a unit that was equal parts brains, brawn, and instinct. Hours passed, and Marco noticed small things about Sophia. The way she frowned when she concentrated, the way she tapped her fingers rhythmically on the desk when frustrated, the brief smile she gave when a countermeasure worked. He remembered Lena, her mother, laughing the same way, gesturing wildly when excited. The resemblance was uncanny, and it pained him to realize how much time he had missed. "Dad," Sophia said suddenly, voice hesitant. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marco's eyes met hers. "Anything. Why did you leave?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was aching, searching, desperate for a truth she had been denied for 20 years. Marco swallowed, the words heavy and sharp. "I was young, selfish, and scared. I wanted power, control, a life I didn't understand how to balance with family. I thought I was protecting you and your mother by staying away. I was wrong, terribly wrong." Sophia's eyes glistened. "And Mom, did she forgive you?" He shook his head slowly. "Not fully, and I don't expect her to. I left a wound that takes time to heal. But I intend to try. Every day." Amara shifted slightly, overhearing, but she said nothing. Her silence was cautious, but he saw a glimmer of acknowledgement in her eyes, a sign that maybe the first cracks in the walls she had built were beginning to show. Sophia reached for his hand hesitantly. "Then we do this together. No pretending, no hiding." Marco gripped it firmly, a silent promise passing between them together. Outside, the city slumbered under the soft rain, unaware that the most dangerous men it had known were no longer alone, and that the next strike would not just be about power or revenge, it would be about family. And for the first time in 20 years, Marco Leone felt the weight of his empire lighten, not because he had power, but because he had something far more precious, a chance at redemption, and a daughter who was finally in his life. But somewhere in the shadows, watching, the remnants of his old world were planning, and the storm, Marco knew, was only just beginning. Night had fallen over Palermo, thick and suffocating, the kind of darkness that makes every street feel like a labyrinth. Marco, Sophia, and Amara were holed up in the safe house, monitors flickering with data from surveillance drones, encrypted messages, and threat assessment. The calm from earlier had vanished, replaced by a tension that clawed at Marco's chest. He knew the enemy wouldn't stop, not until they struck at the heart of everything he held dear. Sophia's fingers flew across the keyboard, decoding messages and tracing movements. "There's a pattern," she said, her voice taut. "They're organized, but it's familiar. It's like someone with insider knowledge is guiding them." Marco froze. Familiar. That word struck like a blade. "Insider," he repeated. "Someone who knows me, my methods, my empire, my habits." Amara's eyes narrowed. "You mean someone from your past?" He didn't answer at first. Memories surged unbidden. Old allies who had betrayed him, men he had trusted and who had plotted his downfall while he was building his empire, blind to the life he left behind. He had hoped that chapter was closed, but the patterns on Sophia's screens told him otherwise. "They know too much," Sophia continued. "They're moving faster than before, anticipating our moves. This isn't just revenge. It's personal." Marco's jaw tightened. "Then it's time we make it personal too." He stood and moved closer to Sophia's monitors. "Show me everything, every weak point, every anomaly. I need to see who we're dealing with." Sophia hesitated for a split second, the same hesitation she had shown when first confronting him. "You need to know," she said softly. "But it's someone close to you. Someone I didn't think could still exist in your world." Marco swallowed hard. "Who?" Her fingers paused over the keys, the glow of the screens reflecting in her wide, determined eyes. "It's Luca, your right-hand man from 20 years ago. The one you trusted more than anyone. He's alive, and he's the one orchestrating all of this." The words hit Marco like a punch to the gut. Luca. He had believed a man dead, lost in a violent betrayal years ago when Marco had left Italy. And yet here he was, resurfacing, orchestrating attacks on the very family Marco had finally found. Rage and guilt tangled inside him. "Why?" Marco whispered, voice low but burning with fury. "Why now? Why after all these years?" Sophia shook her head. "I don't know yet, but I can trace his movements. intercept his communications. If we move fast, we can stop him before he strikes again. Amara's arms crossed tightly. And if we fail? She asked quietly. If he's already inside your world, Marco, if he knows how to get to you and to her. Marco's eyes hardened. Then we fight. We survive. And we protect them. No one hurts my daughter. No one touches her. The three of them spent the night preparing, layering digital defenses with physical ones, planning contingencies for every possible scenario. Sophia's brilliance complemented Marco's streetwise instincts and Amara's protective vigilance, forming a triangle of defense that no ordinary attacker could penetrate. Hours later, a message flashed on Sophia's screen. Tick-tock, Leon. You can't outrun what's coming. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she analyzed the code. He's taunting us. Luca wants you to know he's watching, and he's bringing reinforcements. Marco leaned close to her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Then we hit first, not out of fear, but to protect what matters most. Amara moved closer, her voice calm but firm. We stick together. No one gets left behind. The three of them stepped outside, rain beginning to fall lightly again. Streets empty except for the shadows that lurked in corners. Marco's eyes scanned every rooftop, every alley. He had faced assassins, thieves, and rivals before, but this was different. This was a ghost from the past, a betrayal that had festered for decades, threatening the fragile life he had finally begun to reclaim. A figure emerged from the darkness, Luca, older, sharper, but the same cunning that had once made him indispensable. His eyes flicked to Marco, and then to Sophia and Amora. You really think you can hide? He said, voice dripping with disdain. After all these years, the boy who became a man, running scared, you're predictable. Always have been. Marco didn't flinch. I'm not running anymore, he said, voice low and dangerous. And you after everything you're going to regret underestimating me. Luca smirked, circling them like a predator. You think you can protect her? You think you can fix what you broke? Sophia stepped forward, her laptop in hand. Back off, she said firmly. We're not afraid of you. Luca laughed, a chilling sound that echoed down the empty street. You should be. You don't know what it takes to survive in my world. You don't even know who you are anymore, Leon. Marco's eyes locked with Luca's. I know exactly who I am, and I know what I'm protecting. You made your choices years ago, now I make mine. The rain fell harder, slicking the streets, turning the confrontation into a cinematic tableau of shadow and tension. Marco, Sophia, and Amara stood together, a family forged from survival, fear, and fragile trust. Luca's smirk faltered as he realized that the dynamic had changed. The boy who had left Italy was gone. In his place stood a father, a daughter, and the mother who had raised her united, determined, and dangerous. And in that moment, Marco realized that this confrontation wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption. It was about finally being the man he had promised himself he would be. The first move had been made, but the night was far from over, and Luca's vengeance would be the hardest test they had ever faced. The city was drenched in rain, streets reflecting the fractured lights of Palermo like broken mirrors. Marco led the way, Sophia at his side, Amara close behind, every step calculated, silent, tense. Luca's shadow trailed them, relentless, orchestrating attacks from rooftops, alleyways, and digital feeds. It wasn't just a pursuit, it was a war, and the stakes were impossibly high. Sophia's fingers flew over her laptop as she moved, hacking cameras, rerouting signals, scrambling trackers. He's setting traps, she warned, eyes darting between the screens and the streets. Every turn, every alley it's mapped. He knows the city like the back of his hand, like you do. Marco's eyes hardened. Then we stay unpredictable. We don't follow patterns. We move fast, and we move together. No one gets left behind. Amara adjusted her grip on the small pistol she had trained with over the years. He won't hesitate to hurt us to get to you. Don't underestimate him. The first ambush came at the old port warehouse. Luca's men dropped from the rooftops, guns trained, knives glinting under the streetlights. Marco reacted instantly, instincts honed over decades taking over. He moved fluidly, disarming one attacker while blocking a strike aimed at Sophia. She ducked and threw a digital flash bomb from her laptop interface, a trick she had designed to blind their assailants temporarily. Amara swung her bat with precision, knocking another man to the wet pavement. Their teamwork was seamless, born not of training together but of necessity and trust forged in fire. Marco realized something vital. They were no longer individuals fighting. Alone they were a family, each step a synchronized effort to survive. "Dad," Sophia shouted, spotting a drone hovering above, scanning them. She typed furiously, hacking the drone's feed. Sparks erupted as it fell from the sky, narrowly missing Amara. Marco pressed her against the crates for cover. "Good work. Keep moving." They sprinted across the rain-slicked docks, barrels, and containers offering brief shelter. Every corner they turned, every shadow seemed alive with danger. But Marco's presence, steady and commanding, grounded them. Sophia's ingenuity kept them one step ahead. Amara's vigilance ensured they weren't taken by surprise. Together, they were unstoppable. Then came the most dangerous moment. Luca appeared on a forklift, elevated above the chaos, smirking down at them. "Running in circles, Leon. You think you can protect her? You've already failed once, don't fail again." Marco's eyes burned. "I won't fail. Not her. Not you. Not me." He raised his voice to Sophia. "Take the left route. I'll draw him out." Sophia hesitated. "Dad, we can't. Trust me," he shouted. She nodded reluctantly and darted toward the left route, fingers already working on creating digital obstruction. Luca's eyes narrowed as he realized Marco was attempting a distraction. Marco advanced, every step purposeful, drawing fire and attention. Bullets and shadows chased him, but he moved like water, calculating every angle. Luca underestimated the man who had survived wars, betrayals, and death countless times. This wasn't just instinct, it was experience. A lifetime of surviving when all odds were stacked against him. Sophia used the distraction to her advantage, sending digital interference across Luca's communications, scrambling his sensors and drones. Amara flanked Marco, eliminating anyone trying to flank him physically. The three of them moved like a single organism, the storm around them matched by the storm of their unity. Finally, Marco reached the edge of the dock, water reflecting the rain, forklift rumbling behind him. Luca stepped down, closing the distance, gun raised. Marco didn't flinch. "It ends tonight, Luca," he said, voice calm, deadly. Luca laughed, but there was tension in it now. "You think a father can stop me? After everything, you're still trying to play hero." Marco's eyes flicked to the shadows where Sophia was hidden, tablet ready, fingers poised. Amara's stance was protective, unwavering. And in that moment, he realized the truth. The strength wasn't just in him. It was in the family he had finally reclaimed. Sophia pressed a final key, releasing an EMP pulse that knocked Luca's drone's electronics offline. Luca's smirk faltered. Marco lunged, disarming him in a swift motion, pinning him against the metal railing. Rain poured down, drenching them both, but Marco's grip was unyielding. "Give up," Marco said, voice low, hard. "It's over. No one else gets hurt." Luca's eyes flickered with fury, but he realized he was outmatched, not by weapons or numbers, but by a unity he had underestimated. He slowly raised his hands, a silent acknowledgement that the fight was lost. Sophia emerged from the shadows, panting but triumphant. "We did it," she whispered, voice shaky but proud. Amara approached, her gaze softening as she looked at both of them. You fought together. You both kept her safe." She smiled faintly. I believe you now, Marco." Marco released Luca, letting the authorities, already alerted by Sophia's earlier hacks, take him into custody. He turned to Sophia, his hand reaching for hers. "You were brilliant tonight. I couldn't be prouder." Sophia's eyes glistened, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something deeper acceptance, trust, and the first real bond with the father she had never known. "We make a good team," she said quietly. Amara placed a hand on Marco's shoulder, finally allowing herself a moment of relief. "Together," she said softly. "No matter what comes next, together." For the first time in 20 years, Marco Leone felt a peace he hadn't known in decades. The city was still dangerous, shadows still lurked, but he had found what mattered most: his daughter, his love, and the unbreakable bond of family. And as the rain washed over the docks, Marco knew that no empire, no enemy, no past could take this from him. Not now, not ever. The first light of dawn crept over Palermo, turning rain-slicked streets into silver rivers. The city had survived the night, but more importantly, so had they. Marco, Sofia, and Amara. The battles, the betrayals, the ghosts of the past, they hadn't disappeared, but for the first time, Marco felt a weight lift. Not because the danger was gone, but because he was no longer carrying it alone. They returned to the safe house, drenched and exhausted, but each step felt lighter. Sofia collapsed onto the sofa, her laptop still humming softly, evidence of her relentless work. We made it through," she said, voice small but triumphant. I didn't think I could trust anyone." And now her gaze softened as it landed on Marco. "I trust you." Marco knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "You don't just trust me, Sofia. You trust yourself too. You've always been strong, smarter, faster, braver than anyone I know. I'm just here to make sure you don't have to fight alone." Amara leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, a faint smile breaking through her usual sternness. "It's not just about surviving anymore," she said quietly. "It's about living, and maybe even letting the people you love in without fear." Her eyes met Marco's, a flicker of old emotions, forgiveness tempered by caution. "You've taken the first step." Marco nodded slowly. "I know I can't undo the past. I know there are things I can't fix, but I can choose what I do from this moment forward. And I choose this, all of you, always." Sofia's eyes glistened with tears, and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I've waited 20 years to hear that. I wanted a father. And now I have one." Amara stepped closer, placing a protective hand over both of theirs. "Then let's be a family. Not just in words, but in actions. No more hiding, no more running. Together, we can face whatever comes next." For a long moment, silence hung between them, the kind of silence that feels alive with unspoken words, forgiveness, and hope. Marco felt the weight of decades, the mistakes, the lost time, the emptiness finally begin to lift. He was no longer the man who had abandoned them. He was a father. He was a protector. He was part of a family again. The city outside stirred with life. Cars rumbled, vendors shouted, and the world continued its chaotic rhythm. But inside the safe house, a quiet peace settled, fragile but real. They had survived betrayal, danger, and the shadows of an empire, but they had also found something stronger: each other. Sofia leaned against Marco, finally allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered. "I don't want to go back to being alone." "You won't," Marco said, his voice steady and filled with quiet certainty. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever. We rebuild together, every day, step by step." Amara placed a hand on Sofia's other shoulder, completing the circle of trust and love. "And we will," she said softly. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Marco looked at both of them, his heart swelling with a mix of relief, love, and the long-awaited redemption he'd fought for. The storm had passed, but the bond they had forged it would never break. He had lost 20 years, but he had found something far more valuable: the chance to be the father he was meant to be, the man they needed him to be, and the family they all deserved. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing the city in gold. Marco, Sofia, and Amara stood together by the window, watching Palermo awaken. The world was still dangerous, still uncertain, but they were ready. Not because they were fearless, but because they had each other. And for Marco, that made all the difference. He tightened his grip on Sofia's hand, and she smiled, finally free of the weight of years without him. Amara's gaze softened, trust earned in fire and blood, and the three of them finally allowed themselves to hope. And as the city stretched into a new day, Marco Leone made a silent vow. Never again would he walk away from what mattered most. Not family, not love, not them. Together, they had survived the past, and now they would face the future. If you felt the journey of Marco, Sofia, and Amara moving, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that tug at the heart and thrill the soul.